Hello Whisky fans, and welcome back for the Christmas Eve edition of Whisky Lock Drinks Loads of Whisky. For the internet, no other reason. Doing this all for you guys, really. The things I go through. Hopefully we'll get something a little bit better today, after yesterday's slightly disappointing dram. That Aberfeldy is really a good example of how whisky can just be completely sabotaged, and it's kind of the same theme as the Benromach 10. Benromach 10 that we had, didn't we? That it's a good whisky which is held back a little bit by the presentation. It's really the kind of thing that makes whisky enthusiasts cry, because like I said, ironically when I was adding water to that Aberfeldy 16 yesterday, I was saying that you can add it in but you can't take it out. And that's exactly the problem, that we get these expensive whiskies which you would think would be marketed towards people that care about their whisky. Apparently they're not, but they market them as something for the person that knows their whisky, and then they give you a presentation which makes it kind of useless. So hopefully we'll get something better today. Smells younger, but in a good way. Oh, that might be... yeah, that's a nice, light, natural colour whisky. I was hoping that we might get one more. Possibly suggests that we've got a bit better presentation on this one. Possibly also suggests that we've seen either some bourbon or some refill casks. Possibly bourbon refill. Yeah, that is lovely. Lovely, bright, fresh, appley, bracing, spirity, some nice bitter oak. Look at that colour. Wow. Really nice, fresh green apple peel note. A little bit custardy. Some nice barley sugar notes. Definitely fresh bourbon casks gone into this one. And lots of really robust, nice spirit. Nice fruity spirit put in some quality fresh bourbon oak. It does smell a little bit young, but not immature. Just, it smells like a 10 or 12 year old whisky. And there's nothing wrong with that. Just an observation. Young and bright and fresh and wonderful. Let's see how it tastes. Beautiful. More of that green apple, fresh, fruity spirit on the early palate, and towards the late palate you get a bit more apple peel, fruity tannins, and some slightly bitter oakiness. Just a nice, not like nagging bitterness that you get from a European oak cask, but just a nice dry oakiness on the late palate. And towards the finish, not an enormously long finish, which you'd probably expect from a whisky that's not overly old, but the finish gives you lots of creamy caramel apple notes. Really pleasant, honest whisky. We need more distilleries that make this style of whisky. Not everyone really rants and raves about it. I do, personally. But more people should really... and this sounds a bit like I'm telling other people what to like. But I think that there's enormous value in quality spirit. Like 10, 12 years old, 8 to 12 years old, put in a quality bourbon cask and just left to do its work. It can be an enormously rewarding and quality experience, like the Dalmunich that I had fairly recently, that was only 6 years old, and it was bottled at 60%, and those 6 years were not more than enough, but they were perfectly adequate to tame that spirit into something really wonderful that showcased the fruity spirit flavours and those quality bourbon casks. Also reminds me of things like Balblair and their 10-year-old Bladnoch. Balblair used to do, when they did the vintage releases, they had a 10-year-old vintage which was all ex-bourbon, and that was fantastic. Bladnoch have recently, well, it's discontinued now, but Bladnoch had that 10-year-old that was in a bourbon cask, and that was fantastic. And also Cotswolds Distillery in England, obviously, they have their bourbon cask release, which is obviously a cask strength release, but I think if this was a bit stronger and had a bit more caramel to the profile, this would be a fairly good match for that Cotswolds bourbon cask. Very appley. Freshly cut green apples, like Granny Smith, proper, slightly sour, punchy, sharp green apple note. Slightly custardy and creamy caramel, which has obviously come through from a bourbon cask. So there's no black art to this whiskey, and pun not intended actually. Like the Bruichladdich black art is exactly a prime example of what I'm talking about, that you don't need 1,001 different casks to make a whiskey special. One type of cask, fresh bourbon cask and good spirit is enough. And that beautiful natural colour. Very happy with that one. Not a million miles away from the Craigellachie 13 in profile. Because it's got that... It's kind of like an unsherried Speyside, and that makes no sense, because sherry is really an integral part of Speyside. But I guess what I mean, it's kind of like an unsherried Glenfiddich, unsherried Glenlivet, that kind of thing. I think that that's a really good whiskey. Lovely intensity on the nose. And backed up with some really good intensity on the palate as well. It's the real deal. I think this is probably going to be a 46% whiskey. Probably hard to tell with the age, because if you put spirit in a quality bourbon cask, that Dalmunich is a good example of how you don't necessarily need a lot of years to make it mature and ready. I would guess between 8 and 12 years old, so let's call it 10. 46% bourbon cask quality whiskey. I was about to go and have a look, but we haven't put it on the leaderboard. This is the Kingsbarns Sherry Cask, single cask, that I'm having a quick nose of here. And again, really impossible to judge these on a linear scale, because the Kingsbarns is obviously another, probably younger than what we've got today, but another young whiskey, but this is matured in a very good and very fresh sherry butt. Me personally, I think this is going to be down to, it's a battle between this and the Craigellachie 13. So this is either going to go into second or third place. I'm going to pour a little bit of the Craigellachie. That's a fantastic whiskey. Really do like Craigellachie 13, and it's a little bit of a crime that I haven't reviewed it yet, because I do really like it. And I've had a bottle for quite a while. Had a couple of bottles. very, very good. Really is the hero of Speyside, Craigellachie. And very difficult to score that against today's dram. I think they're both probably the same strength, similar intensity. On the Craigellachie it's a little bit more buttery and creamy and probably a little bit sweeter. Today's dram is a little bit sharper, a little bit more spirity, a little bit more punchy, a little bit more edge to it, and for that reason I think that today's dram is exactly the same level of quality to the Craigellachie 13, but I think that the sharp, fruity, spirity note on today's dram means that this is going to be a new number 2. So what have we got? So we've only got 2 drams left now. It is a Balblair. So this is one of the new Balblairs, and I say new, they've probably been out for a couple of years now. Balblair 12-year-old, which is a 46% whiskey, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, 46%. Balblair 12, with that rather bizarre kind of Blair Witch style logo that they use these days. I don't know if you can see that. Yeah, a little bit Blair Witch. But whatever deity they're praying to, I think that Balblair, it's obviously working because they're making great whiskey. And I think I've criticised Balblair before, as a lot of people have, in coming away from the vintage release system, because vintage releases are a great way to make whiskey, especially if it's single vintage, so you've got all your casks coming from the same year. It's really wonderful to see that singular style of whiskey, or singular style of base spirit. I think I've said before that single vintage whiskey is pretty much the closest you can get to single cask without being single cask. So it is a shame that they've moved from vintages over to age statements. But this Balblair 12, it is a whiskey that I've had before. I've got a bottle which I'm trying to make last because I haven't reviewed it yet. But I've got a bottle of the 12 and the 15 and the 18. I don't think I've tried the 15 and the 18 yet. I've also got some old vintage releases from Balblair that I haven't opened yet, that I'm kind of saving because they are that bit special. But me personally, I think that the Balblair 12 is another fantastic whiskey, and I wouldn't say that the old vintage releases that they used to do are better. They're different, and I think that when they did that rebrand and switched over to age statements rather than vintages, something was lost, but it's still fantastic whiskey and fully deserves the number 2 spot. I'm also really glad, and I don't think this was a conscious thing or even a subconscious thing, that all number 1 and number 2 whiskies are very, very, very pale. I don't think that's a coincidence. So let me know if you agree. I know a lot of people are a bit sore about the lack of vintages with Balblair, and a lot of people have kind of lost faith in them, but I still think they're making really good stuff. Especially, and this really aligns with my preference, quality, affordable, bourbon matured spirit that really shows the quality of the actual original distillate. Fantastic whiskey. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow when it'll be Christmas Day. Can hear the sleigh bells and feel the indigestion already. Hopefully, I realise that a lot of you will have other things to do, but hopefully at some point you'll be able to join me on my video that I'll be putting out tomorrow, when we'll see if we have got something special behind the 25 door. Thanks for watching, and cheers.